Thank you, Stuart. And thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank, before I start, I'd like to thank the City of Los Angeles and also the Department of Cultural Affairs for the honor of being a COLA recipient, and particularly Joe Smoke, Ben Espinoza, and Brenda Slaughter Reynolds. And I'd also like to thank the fellow artists, both the 10 artists in the COLA cohort and the 3 other artists who are performing tonight. It's an honor to be in this company. I'm going to slow things down by reading a little bit of prose and a little bit of poetry. What I decided I wanted to do was read work that I had developed as part of the COLA fellowship period. So I'll start with an essay that is a small piece of prose that's in the COLA program, and then I'll move into a couple of other things. And thank you in advance for being here. So this first piece is called Sunday Morning. I can feel the heat moving in, 9:30 on a Sunday morning in July, next to last Sunday in the month, and the streets a silent emptiness, somnolent, no dogs, no walkers, no joggers, like the residue of a neutron bomb. Neutron bomb, no, far too histrionic, far too loaded, suggestive of something, some act of mass destruction, metaphor. This morning is the opposite, clear and quiet, barely even call of birds. I always listen for the birds in California. Old wives' tale, incantation. The earth won't quake while the birds are singing. They must be silent for at least 3 hours. I wake up tired this morning or hungover. The two are tandem since our son left. 3 days now, she and I in a house with no children. Just us, the dog, and the son's cat. Small animals, yes, they need to be cared for, but neither asks for very much. Food and water, space to sleep and piss and shit. She and I, we ease up when the kids aren't around. Smoke weed, go out to eat. It's like a callback, a reminder, a flash of how it once was, that first summer we spent together when she was working in Philadelphia and I was in New York. Back then I would take the train down for the weekend, walk up from 30th Street Station to her apartment, the heat buzzing as if the world had been swaddled in wet gauze. I could feel myself pushed through it with every step, as if I were parting a curtain between this universe and the next one, everything that has ever been and everything that has never been, coexisting in overlapping layers, inevitable. And in spite of myself, that is how I feel this morning, walking when I would rather stay in bed. San Vicente, east to Curson, north to Wilshire, then another few blocks, 4 or 5. I walk for exercise, or what passes in my life for exercise. 1.5 miles, 2 miles most days. I go to the store, to the bank, to the dry cleaner, all that urban detritus. But walking these streets also helps define for me a sense of place, a sense of what the boundaries are. It's not about adventure, not this morning or most mornings, but rather reassurance, reminding myself of who and where I am. This is why I take the same walks, along the same sidewalks, past the same houses, the same loose cycle of pavement beneath my feet. What changes is not place, but time. My internal weather, the constant overlay of repeated movement, each with its own, a different resonance. This morning, for instance, I'm walking quickly, not noticing much, sweat like a light dust high upon my neckline in the center of my back. I am tired. Have I said that? Sour stomach, too much coffee, or not enough? The sidewalks are empty and sun-baked, not even a breath of moisture in the air. It is a heat that puts me in mind of cicadas, although it is clear. At Wilshire, sunlight dapples the trees near the tar pits, rendering the grass electric green. A week or so ago, I read an article about development at Wilshire and Fairfax that lamented the demise of the corner's quiet elegance. I don't know which Wilshire Boulevard the writer was describing, but to me, such words have never defined this stretch. The next time I'm here in the mid-afternoon on a Monday or Tuesday, I take a series of photographs to illustrate the point. Construction, traffic down to a single lane crossing Wilshire where the horns blurt out their own slow symphony, freeway jam. This is another reason I walk in the neighborhood, to remind myself. This morning, 9:45 now, the office towers along Wilshire are silent, still as silhouettes against the sun. There is a sense neither of expectation nor of abandonment, but rather of being, as if they are only monoliths. As I am walking fast, thinking I am hungry, I watch as my sneakers, black Chuck Taylor high tops, cycle one foot into the other and then again. The moment flickers and it passes. I watch as sun speckles into shadow and back to light. Sometimes when I'm walking, I lose momentum, although it is not exactly accurate to say I get tired. I feel the heat settle like a layer of perspiration, as if I haven't showered for a day or two. That's how I felt this morning when I set out, or how I thought I felt. But the more I walk, the more I have the sense that we are at the end of a run. Partly that's because there are no kids in the house, which means I don't have anyone to live up to, no one to betray or disappoint. Partly it has to do with the fact that I have no plans today, no responsibility. Later, after we get home, or after I'm home again, she will take a nap. By then, it is the afternoon, and I am reading on the couch in the living room, fan blowing a light breeze across my legs. As I lay there, the cat stretches across my lap, turns away from me, tail swishing at my face. I do not like cats. I am allergic to them, but I do not brush him off. We've been living together for 3 months now, and I let him sit for about 10 minutes before he moves down to my feet. When I started to write this essay, I thought that's what I thought it would be about. That was the image in my mind. A quiet Sunday, air heated and heavy behind the closed windows and drawn curtains of the living room. Sometimes it becomes so hot here, it is all I can do to keep my clothes on. I cannot sit or focus on a thing. Sometimes it becomes so hot outside, I wish the apocalypse would arrive already, that I might be spared the discomfort, the weight and burden of my physical self. Sometimes, however, it is just the opposite. So still and silent, it is as if time has stopped. It hasn't, of course. It always starts up again, moving too quickly. But for the moment anyway, I get a glimmer of how it would be to live without thinking, without worrying or judging, in what let's call the ever-present now. So that's the first piece. While I had this grant, oh, thank you. There you go, thanks. During the period I had this grant, I ended up writing a cycle of poems, and I'm going to read that to you. It's short. I'm going to read that to you. It's a bunch of poems, most of them quite short, one a little long. The first one is a one-line poem, which is also known as a monostick. Poems can come in all sizes, and it serves sort of as an epigraph, perhaps. The name of the project is coup de vieux, which is a French phrase that gets explained in the text. So, the monostick. Chaos is the only God that matters. This is called Morning Walk. Up early in spitting rain, winter sky gauzy and low, brow dotted with fine points of precipitation, the dawn a held breath or a promise of a world in which nothing ever happens and all we have to hope for is a moment such as this. This is the title poem, Coup de Vieux. It's dedicated to an old friend of mine named Tom McGee. Thrice in 3 nights, the dead have come my way. Twice, it is you. Twin Cities accent, rough and low, like there's a globus in your throat. I can hear the timbre, yet I cannot carry back a word you say. Then last night, my grandfather, an ancient apparition, if younger still than he would be alive. 8th of a millennium since his shtetl birth, and all that's left is this bird-boned specter perched in an Adirondack chair as my father recalls to me his generosity. And even in sleep, I know something is wrong here. Even in sleep, I know this is a dream. My grandfather less sentient than a sack of rags, maybe ghost-like is the better term. He was not my father's father, and he was not by any account a generous man, although he was mostly so with me, until, that is, I began to grow older and he began to lose his wits, 2 circumstances disconnected, but for having taken place at once. My father now in relative affliction, if not broken, then on the point of breaking, hard-pressed to speak, to push the words out, eyes staring from the furrowed flesh of a face that may as well be carved from crumbled stone. So what then of you, first ever roommate, dead a year or possibly 2? I don't remember, which only reaffirms everything we understood. Ours was not a relationship as much as a calculation, an algorithm for distance in shared space. What I mean is, even when we lived together, we were scarcely partners, except that February evening in the Boston Greyhound, me on acid and you electing to miss your own bus to ensure I safely boarded mine. Providential, plain and simple to have you in attendance for such a rescue mission. We were never fellow travelers in that way. Now, it's as if I'm visiting you in your death dream, calling on you wherever you have gone. What is death anyway? What is dissolution? What is the way of flesh, of spirit, soul? What is it like where you have traveled? How does it feel to slip the body's bounds and disappear? You're dead, I said to you the first night you materialized, and yet you returned again to leave no doubt, no sort of message I could use. Now you're nowhere, and I can only wonder at the dead and the near dead, their signs and symbols, hollowed out, deflating slowly like balloons withered from within. Coup de vieux is French for it, when one suddenly ages. You did not live long enough for that. Although what do I know? I never encountered you again, just the photograph accompanying your death notice in the alumni news. There's little small haiku sort of peppered through here, so here's the first one. On the day after the apocalypse, let 1,000 flowers bloom. This one is called Char. Wake at dawn to sun singed red through the cathedral window, 11,000 acres, zero containment, air as raw as if a hot coil has been pushed into its neck. 200 miles southwest, the burn accelerates, Sunday morning barely underway, and already I am wondering how long until we pack the car. This is Contraband. Busted tonight by my daughter, doing what? I won't say. Although, if you know me, it shouldn't be too hard to guess. But what the hell? She's 18, and I'm about to turn 56, so we're into a whole new territory of our lives here in which there can be no deception, and everybody recognizes what's up. This is not the first time, nor, I get it, will it be the last we go through this role reversal. Kid parenting the parent, kid holding out that disapproving tone. Meanwhile, I slip into objection, mumbling apologies when I couldn't tell you what I'm sorry for. The second haiku. My foot wants always to land on the uneven stone, the broken curb. This is called August 6th, 2018. We're all going to die, it's true, but then there's this. Monday evening, early August, walking the dog and all is quiet. Daughter arguing with me about a piece I wrote that she thinks lacks the necessary nuance. I live to hear her take my reasoning apart. The night is hot and flat as fire. I feel like I could live forever, or no, not forever, but if forever was right now. Here we are, the end of summer, and I am breathing, each second filling the space left by the last. Ain't that nothing, I want to cry out, but it feels so solid, so substantial, as if no harm could ever befall any one of us. Trace. In a corner of my eye, a spinner dropping, macular or spiritual or stroke. I search the kitchen floor, but it yields no trace, just the usual detritus and dirt. Potatoes baking in the oven, I am standing, drink in hand. Is it a ghost or a piece of myself falling? Is it a message from some other world or this? And here's the third haiku. That lone slender scud, like a knife blade pressed against the throat of the sky. This one's called Irene Wild, which is the name of a song that gets worked in here. It's dedicated to my nephew Curtis, who appears in the poem. He's a guitar player. In the poem, he's a guitar player too. In the next room, my nephew performs a song I first heard in this apartment 4 decades ago, and time collapses, past and future infiltrating one another until the boundaries blur. A tough week, adult responsibility falling on me like a tower crashing, and all I want to do is hide out in the rubble, run away. Earlier, in the kitchen, we were talking about Mick Ronson, who I saw play with Ian Hunter in 1982, Now my nephew is singing Irene Wild in his father's old bedroom, and I'm remembering my dead friend Anthony Stark, with whom I discovered this music. We were boys ourselves then, barely 14, but I am a boy no longer. 54, and there's so much more, although today it doesn't feel like that, or maybe I don't care to know. Who am I? Where am I going? There's a subtext to this poem, but I don't want to share it. Rather, listen to my nephew play a 40-year-old song no one else knows, hiding behind a closed door, so he cannot see me, cannot hear me sing along. And this is called Highlight of My Day. So the first line is the title of the poem. Highlight of my day is right now in bed with Ray, her back pressed against mine, dog curled at my feet. It's 6:35 a.m., and I really need to get to work. But it's so warm here, time suspended, as if were I to remain beneath this blanket, the world would cease its endless roiling and the clock would never start. And the final haiku, which closes the cycle of poems, walking rain-dark streets the morning after the morning after the storm, sky one long low cloud. And I'm going to close with another short piece of prose that I wrote earlier this year. One of the great things about the COLA process was that it allowed me the space to do some writing I wouldn't have otherwise done, and this is one such piece. The morning after Thanksgiving, my wife gave me a diamond stud. This was in lieu of another, gone missing at the start of summer at a hotel in Rancho Mirage. I had been in the desert to teach writing, an excursion I undertake every 6 months. The errant earring had replaced one lost 20 years earlier in the shower. I'd watched as a whiplash of soapy water sluiced it down the drain. You may wonder why I didn't give up on earrings altogether. To me, they are engagement rings. The first I received not long before our wedding. I wore it with a thin gold hoop. Ironic? That was the idea. I was in my 20s and at best ambivalent about marriage, not because of who the two of us were to one another, but out of resistance to the institution itself. Marriage, I believed, and in many ways still do, was a bourgeois affectation, an affirmation by the state of a condition that did not need to be affirmed. Love was love, wasn't that the case? The state had nothing to do with it. If it were otherwise, marriage would have been, this was in the late 1980s, available to everyone. It would have been a fundamental right. I wanted to imagine love as wild, unbounded. I wanted to imagine love as dangerous. I had no interest in a legal partnership, stayed and sanctioned, all the passion burned away. My wife had a different perspective, that marriage might yield a new intimacy. In the end, she was right. Love as risk or faith or commitment, which is how it happened. This, I want to tell you, is why ours has survived. If that sounds like a mantra or a superstition, I didn't interpret the missing studs as signs. That doesn't mean I wasn't affected. I'd worn an earring since I was 19, and without one, I felt naked is not right, more unprotected or exposed. I liked to play with my earring, to twirl it between thumb and forefinger. I liked to worry it, to reassure myself. Of what? That things remained the same, I guess, that we were still connected, unchanged in some fundamental sense. That this was true and not true was almost entirely the case. We'd grown up together, my wife and I. We'd learned what love meant, just exactly how much risk and danger it required. We'd raised 2 kids, endured joy and loss, celebrated and consoled one another for more than half our lives. We had real and metaphorical scars. The hole in my earlobe represented one such, a divot, a reminder, an emptiness. I couldn't leave it alone. To touch that flesh felt like exploring something unresolved, some open question. It felt as if I had to make a choice. Maybe the earring was my bourgeois affectation. Maybe it was a signifier of the past. And yet these studs had taken on real meaning. As I fitted the replacement, I was aware less of relief, although that too, than of a breath of restoration, as if a vacancy had been refilled. A week later, I returned to the desert. I checked in and found my room. It was the same one in which I'd lost the earring. I recognized it as soon as I unlocked the door. Let's not be dramatic. I didn't gasp or react. Maybe for a moment in the multiverse I was thinking about synchronicity, but who can say? Here I was with my new earring in the space where my last had slipped into the abyss. It was half a year later, and what was I to do? Love is a burning thing, Johnny Cash sang, and it makes a fiery ring. He was suggesting love can scald us. He was suggesting love can leave a mark. I did my week of teaching. I checked my earring in the morning and at night. At times I wondered if it were a test, but I know the universe doesn't work that way. This had been the whole idea of love, hadn't it? To reinvent ourselves, my wife and I, in the image of our own desire. Now we were back, or I was, staring down the serendipity of everything. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about the overlap, although that doesn't mean I had any expectations. At the end of the week, I drove back to Los Angeles, the stud in my ear, a burning ring of fire. Thank you very much for listening.